So it's about time that I talked about the March 2021 tier list. I know that it's not March anymore. It's been a while. I've been busy, but it's about time I get down to it. So let's get into it. This video is going to be a little weird because I'm going to basically ignore the January tier list that was posted. It was only relevant for like a month. So this video is going to be more of a sequel to my previous tier list video, not the one discussing the balance update, the one before that, the one where I actually went through the tier lists. So this video is going to be a follow-up to that. So I'll be referring directly to that and not to the January one, basically at all. So with that out of the way, let's just go ahead and look at all the new things that were added. So again, I have all the characters that were moved around or added between my last tier list video and this one. So characters that were moved up on the list are circled in green, characters that were moved down are circled in red, and characters that are circled in yellow are new additions, new characters, right? So let's go ahead and start. First off, we have Rito. Rito was moved up because he got a buff in that most recent balance patch. It was a pretty minor thing. It was just his counter got a cost reduction and a super slight damage reduction, and then his strike combo was made to actually be able to function. So now that his strike move works, that alone, I think, pushes him up to C. I think he was in D, or gosh, maybe even E, I'm not sure. But he was a bit lower, and now he's been moved up. He's still not very good, but he is significantly better than he was before. It's amazing how much one change, just fixing something so that it works the way that it should, actually makes the character a lot better. Next is classic Kimberly. She was also buffed in that most recent balance update. So her primary strike combo is 1 point less expensive, which is good because it was always too expensive at 4 points of energy. It has like the same amount of damage as an average 3 cost strike combo. So at a cost of 4, it didn't really make a whole lot of sense. But now that it costs 3, that's better. And because it's less expensive, it's much easier to cycle to get her backflip kick, which is what you actually want to use because that attack is really good. And then I think her breaker was made a little faster, and they gave it a stagger on it, which is really good because it used to do literally nothing. So it's kind of a useless move. It's still a little too slow. I think it should be a little bit faster, but it's definitely much better now. So again, I don't think she was moved up that much, but she is certainly better. Coreagg's moved down. He wasn't nerfed at all. Nothing happened to him. But he used to be in B, but we decided to move him down because he's just not very good. He has a lot of weaknesses. In some situations, he's not that bad, but overall, the fact that he has 3 attacks that cost 5 is just too much of a hindrance, especially his wolf attack ability. That attack is so bad because it's a counter, and counters reset your energy timer no matter what. So if you use his shield bash directly into his counter, which by the way, you can now move after his shield bash, which is great. But if you use shield bash, move forward, and then use wolf attack, it might still not get both hits because the range of the physical attack is really, really small. So that's one thing, right? You won't always get the full hit of the attack. Second thing is that it resets your energy timer. And because shield bash into wolf attack is 10 points of energy, that's your whole meter. If you do that, you'll use up all of your energy and reset your energy counter so that it takes even longer to start gaining energy again. So you're left completely defenseless. It's just awful. It's awful when that happens. And another thing is the wolf attack doesn't even do that much damage. So even if you do land both hits, it's still not a very strong attack. So I honestly, just for that alone, I think he was moved down. But in general, just the fact that his attacks are so expensive, it makes him really inflexible with assists and stuff. And he just, compared to a lot of other characters, he just doesn't really compete. Compared to a lot of the characters in B, he underperforms. Next up, Blue Centurion. Blue Centurion has had a pretty rocky relationship with balance updates. He was buffed way after he came out. Then he was nerfed with this last balance update. He was actually meta for a while, but now he's been brought back down to a reasonable level. I think the real question, the one that matters, is he better than when he first came out? I would say yes, but not by much. He has two 50-50 strikes, a fast, relatively fast breaker, a good counter move, and a time-freezing super, so he's pretty good. However, his biggest drawbacks are that his overall damage is kind of low, with his breaker being his only real damage dealer. Both of his strikes are still a little slow on their first hits, so they can still be blocked with fast reactions, and his time-stopping super is only good for the time stop itself. The ability's intended purpose of obscuring the type of move you're using is still pretty worthless. Next is Heckle. He was moved up to B. Look, I've said this before. I don't make the tier list. It's a group effort of like 5 of us. There's 5 of us in this group, and we like debate things. Literally, Heckle's moved up because one person said, "Hey, I think Heckle should be moved up," and no one challenged it, so he was moved up. I don't think he should be moved up. I think he belongs in C. I think everything he has is super easy to counter. He has pretty high damage, but he's just so easy to work around that I don't think he should be up here. And I think the same thing can be said about Coda. I think Coda should be C tier as well. I don't think he's very good. I think you can work around him pretty easily. I think he really needs assists in order to function even now. So, while Coda is significantly better, Coda was actually buffed by the most recent balance update, but I don't think he's this good. So, I would put him at C. But if you're going to make the argument for B, he does have a pretty quick, low-cost breaker in that primary slot, right? It only has a cost of 2, it staggers, and, it's a pretty good breaker trap. And then he still has his like stunning projectile, which has always been a good move. His strike combo works a lot better now. It's much easier to use. And his special breaker, which launches the opponent, that allows for a lot of combo flexibility. So that's cool. But like I said, I don't think he belongs in B. I think he should be C, just because it's still very difficult to actually initiate a combo with him. You still have to play really defensively. So yeah, I don't think he deserves to be up here, but oh well. Next is Alarian, right? Solar Ranger. She wasn't touched at all since my last video. She got moved down because basically the thing is, right, she only has one real offensive option with her strike. So if she doesn't draw that, then she's kinda screwed. All the other characters in A, they don't really have that issue of being stuck without an offensive tool. So yeah, she's kinda weaker than the rest of them. Next up is Pumpkin Wrapper. It's honestly just super weird to me that I haven't talked about this guy yet. It feels like he's been in the game for a long time at this point. I once heard someone say that Pumpkin Wrapper is basically just a villain version of Ziggy, and I agree with that. Pumpkin Wrapper is incredibly defensive, but he's a very good defensive character, just like Ziggy. His 2 breakers are incredible with their high speed and combo flexibility, with his special breaker's healing ability being really useful as well. His strike is largely standard, but it has pretty good range, and his counter launches the opponent for easy combos. Like Ziggy, he struggles on the offensive, although he does struggle a little less due to his breaker's speed. He does have a very large and obvious weakness, though, with his counter. Pumpkin Wrapper's counter leaves him immobile for an insane amount of time, so using it at the wrong time is basically a death sentence. So yeah, Pumpkin Wrapper's good, mostly on defense, but he has some pretty clear weaknesses that I think make him B. Goldar has moved down from A. He got nerfed in that last balance update. I don't really agree with his nerf. Not because I don't think he was too strong. I think in some instances he was a little too strong, but I think there were characters that were so much stronger than him that I don't think they should have nerfed him first, But all they really did was they increased the cost of his primary strike and made it a little slower, because the thing is that was a 50-50 move, right? So you could land the first hit and then cancel. But because the second hit was so fast, you could just use the attack. And because the second hit was so quick, even if your opponent wanted to block it, sometimes they just couldn't, because the second hit would hit them before they could put up a block, and then you could go directly into one of his other attacks. So that strike was, I think, like way too good. So they increased the cost and they slowed it down so that you actually have a chance of blocking it. So that, I think, is fair, but Aside from that, the only other change they made was decreasing the damage on his Stomping Breaker. This is also fine. It makes sense, because the attack was incredibly powerful, only being a few hundred points of damage weaker than Snide's Vortex Slash, while also being less expensive than Vortex Slash and being able to set up combos unlike Vortex Slash. Golar's Stomp is now still powerful, but in more reasonable manner. Gia got hit by that recent balance patch as well, with her counter and breaker having their costs increased by 1, and her special strike now does less damage. That's it. Even with these changes, you could argue that she's still A tier, because she's still really flexible. She has that 50-50 special strike and a fast breaker, and an overall low-cost moveset. But now she has a pretty serious lack of damage. That makes her a little on the weaker side. So I think B is probably more fitting. For now, at least, right? Adam. Oh my gosh, Adam. Adam had a very hard fall all the way down from S+. He had a lot of changes, like his Vanishing Drop and Explosive Escape now display their types when they're activated. Explosive Escape is a little bit weaker, one of his super moves is a little bit weaker, but the real change that dropped him all the way down to B is his Twin Slicer. Twin Slicer is now way slower than it used to be, making it way easier to block. That was his go-to combo starter, and now it's gone. So now he's still good, right? He's still good, but you have to actually think when using him. You can't just throw out random attacks and wipe your opponent. You have to actually be a little considerate about how you use your energy and which attacks to use. So yeah, he's B tier now. Delphine is kind of hard to talk about because she doesn't do anything like special or unique. Like the only like kind of gimmick type thing she has is her 50-50 primary strike. Outside of that, she's just like really solid. I really don't know what to say. She's just good. Next is Zane. Zane is the character I think moved up the most with that last balance patch, shooting up all the way from E tier to A tier. His primary strike is now a 50-50 strike combo, and his special strike is now cancelable on startup, which makes it 50-50 if you have your opponent cornered, but also means you can quickly throw away the attack if you just don't want it. Before, his special strike was a huge liability, very little practical application, but now you can just throw it out, so that's really good. His counter got a damage boost, a 70% one, if Enway did it correctly. But honestly, I think it could be even stronger. I think they could have had a full 100% damage boost. But oh well. With all these changes, I can still see the argument for Zane only being B, because I mean, sure, he has 2 50-50 moves, well, really 1.5, but those moves still aren't as good as Dragon's, right? He doesn't have an instant combo starter. I mean, his counter is instant, but it's not a combo starter. So why A tier then? I think I would argue that it's because his moves give him a lot of flexibility. I've already talked about how his strikes are both 50-50s, but he also has a super quick counter to push an enemy off of him that actually does damage now. A high damage breaker that does alright as a breaker trap. Both of his strikes having a lot of utility when he actually use them in combos. Especially his special strike, that is now far more usable as a launcher. And just in general, I think he performs a bit better than a lot of the B tier characters. So Chun-Li Ranger was dropped down from S. I think she was S- on the January list, and now she's A here. But she wasn't touched at all. It was just decided that she should be moved down. Personally, I don't fully agree with this. I think she should have been kept in S-. Here's the thing though. Everything she has can be blocked on reaction. That fact makes her much easier to counter than the other characters in S or S-, who all have some sort of instant or near instant move or some crazy gimmick that makes up for it. She doesn't really have that. I mean, sure, she has her super mode, but that's basically the same as every other Street Fighter super mode, so she doesn't get a lot of points there. The reason I personally wouldn't put her in A is that despite her attacks being completely blockable on reaction, when I fight her in an actual match, I can never manage to actually stop her. Basically, everything she throws at me lands, and I'm just too slow to counter. Maybe it's a mental thing, who knows. Next is Dragon Shield Jason. Dragon Shield Jason was hit by that last balance patch pretty lightly, all things considered. His counter had its cost increased to 4, and his spinny breaker had a slight damage decrease. It's not much, but this was enough to bring him down to A, The change to his counter means that he now has to be far more conscious of how he spends his energy, unlike before where he could just keep throwing out his primary slot until something worked. His breaker's reduction in damage barely factors in at all, honestly, but like you can kinda tell that he's a little weaker now when he uses it. So yeah, you basically just have to be a little bit more careful when using him. Aside from that, he's basically the same. Dragon Shield Kim was moved down from S to S minus in January, but I never had the chance to talk about it. It's nothing huge, but the main reason I would say for her being moved down is just that her damage is a little low when compared to the other S characters. So this is less that Dragon Shield Kim is too weak, and more that the other S2 characters are just stronger. Okay, next up, Merrick. Merrick has a ton of gimmicks. He has two 50-50 strikes, a breaker that makes him invincible once it starts, a stack mechanic that makes his breakers and general movement faster as it builds, and a typeless super move that becomes usable once he reaches half health. So it's remarkable that despite all of this, I still don't think that he's S. The reason being that despite all of these clear advantages, he has some pretty obvious drawbacks. Both of his strike combos are kinda slow, with Ancient Warrior in particular being slow enough to block on reaction. That alone is a huge knock against him, as it makes that move extremely unsafe to use, even though you're gonna want to use his strikes to build up speed stacks, inflict damage, and fake out your opponents. Then you have his breakers, which are both pretty slow and easy to counter. Even with the speed stack ability, they only become fast enough to actually become a problem once he reaches the second highest level at 4 out of 6 stacks. His super move is a great move, but you only get to use it once he drops to half health, and almost none of his attacks are actually fast enough to combo off of it, except for Lunar Q and his breakers when at 4 stacks or higher. So yeah, he's really good. Like, don't get me wrong, I just spent the last however long like trashing on him. So yeah, he's still really good, but there are a lot of like obvious things that hold him back. So once you compare him to the other characters in S, he falls short. So okay, with Connor, here's the thing. 3 out of 4 of Connor's moves are just pretty good or okay. He has a decent 50-50 strike, a low-cost breaker with respectable range and damage, and a slow but powerful, mostly combo-ending breaker. If it was just these attacks, he would be A tier, or maybe even B. But he has one move that just completely shoots him up to S minus, Tyranno Staff. Tyranno Staff is stupidly fast, has good range that covers most of the stage, and it launches opponents up for an easy combo. It is by far his best move, and honestly one of the best moves in the game. You can also cancel it after the first hit, but I don't know why you would want to, since its insanely high speed and range basically guarantees that it will land no matter what. The thing that stops him from being S, though, in my opinion, is that he relies too heavily on his breakers. This makes him like really susceptible to strikes, as if he uses Tyranno Staff and his opponent uses a strike combo at the same time, then the strike will win. Additionally, Tyranno Staff is in the same slot as Speed Cyclone, meaning that if he's stuck with Speed Cyclone, he just doesn't have access to Tyranno Staff and he can't quickly cycle out Speed Cyclone to get it, so that's kind of a pretty big hindrance for him. Alright, then we got Tyzon, the Mercury Ranger. Tyzon is kind of a funny one, because when the list was first posted, there were a lot of complaints that he was too low in S- and that he should have just been in S. I say this is kind of funny because in our tier list discussion group, some people wanted to put him even lower in A tier. I mean, I guess that just, goes to show you that people always have different opinions on things no matter what, right? But my job here is to justify these decisions made here for this list, so I'm going to try and justify why he should be S-. I voted for him to be S-. So I think right away I need to mention his Mercurian Armor move. I think people really overhype this attack and make it seem way better than it actually is. Because look, the attack gives you super armor, but unlike other moves with super armor like Black Dragons or Dragon Shield Zax that only give you armor until the first hit ends, Mercurian Armor gives super armor until the end of the second hit. On the one hand, this is good. It gives the user of the attack the ability to shrug off other moves for a pretty long time, so you're safe while using it. On the other hand, the length of Mercurian armor being so long means that you can counter it using very long and or slow attacks. So, for example, if Taizan opens with Mercurian armor against, say, Movie Kim, right? Then Kim can counter with her Vortex launch, which will do a lot of damage. Vortex launch probably won't last long enough to actually launch Taizan, but he will still take the full damage of the attack, and that is a lot of damage. While this may seem like a very specific situation, the point I'm trying to get across is that any character with a longer, slower, strong strike like that can use it to easily bypass Mercurian armor and deal big damage to Taizan. And eventually that damage is going to add up. And then you also have to consider that once Taizan falls below a certain threshold of health, like once he gets that level where any one hit will kill him, then the super armor just doesn't matter anymore. Because if you get hit, you'll just die. Then you also have the fact that Mercurian armor is pretty weak, being weaker than both of his strikes that are less expensive and faster and like more useful in my opinion. Then like the final thing that I'm going to bring up here is that Mercurian armor, because of its low damage, is also pretty bad at building meter for his super attack, because his super attack only builds meter from his primary attacks. And because Mercurian armor doesn't do a lot of damage, that means it doesn't build a lot of meter. The real highlight of his moveset is Overdrive Kick, his special strike. That thing is insanely fast, great at starting combos, does pretty high damage for what it is, and you can cancel it if you think you're gonna miss. His other two attacks are good, but not really special in any way, so they're not really worth talking about. His super move is typeless, goes full screen, and launches the opponent, which is all really good, but just crap damage, so that kind of balances out. So yeah, Taizan has a lot going for him. But I think that Mercurian armor is ironically his weakest point and kinda not necessarily ruins him, but it does knock him down a peg to the point that he's not as good as the other S characters, even if it's just by a little, right? Because it does have its uses. The move does have its uses. It's not completely worthless, but it does have pretty large flaws in it. So I think S- is a good spot for him. So, Daggeron. Daggeron is honestly kind of stupid. He has a very good base moveset, but then he also has a super mode that completely changes all of his moves, stops time, grants him 2 points of free energy, and starts to heal him. It's just too much, honestly. Why then is he only S and not S+? I'd say that it's because even though he is pretty ridiculous, he's still way more manageable than something that would be S+. Everything he has in his base form is reactable. Just barely, but reactable. It's hard to believe, but it's true. So if you know what you're doing, then you can actually deal with him in this phase. Once he flips the switch and goes into his super mode, that's a completely different story. Both of his strikes are easy enough to deal with, but the two breakers he gets are just way too fast and way too strong. Even still, his breakers being as good as they are make him rely on them a bit too much, to the point that most Daggeron players will get pretty predictable. So in conclusion, Daggeron is really freaking good, but he still has a few downsides that hold him back from going beyond into S+. So now we're at the last character. The character I want to talk about the most. Scorpina. I really shouldn't have to explain why Scorpina is as strong as she is, but I'm going to anyway, in detail, just to make it clear. So it's mainly her breakers that are stupid, right? But her counters aren't bad either. With her counters, neither of them are good damage dealers, but they're both inexpensive and useful for combos. Ruthless Slashes also deals poison on his first hit, because, yeah, that's right, she has poison damage. Poison damage is basically the same as the fire damage over time, except it lasts longer, deals more damage, and deals damage at a faster rate. So it's basically just fire, but better, and she has it on 3 out of her 4 moves. Both of her breakers have poison damage, with Scorpina's Rage, that's the launcher one, dealing poison damage on the second hit and launching. Crescent Blade has her throw her boomerang, deal poison damage on the second hit, and then end with a stun when the boomerang comes back and hits again. That's not to mention that both of these breakers are stupidly fast, far faster than any breaker should be. To put this into perspective, Dragon Shield Jason's assist is not a good combo starter because the attack has a high amount of recovery, meaning you would need an insanely fast attack in order to actually be able to combo off of it. And you can with both of her breakers because they're that fast. But going back to Crescent Blade, the attack is incredible due to its speed and damage, so you can just use the attack normally and be fine. You don't really have to think about it. However, it is also cancelable after the first or second hit, so you can cancel this for two reasons. First reason is when you land it. You can cancel it after the first hit, which stuns, to give yourself a huge amount of time to recover energy, as the boomerang will come back and stun again, so you'll have time to gain energy for the time of 2 stuns, which you can also cancel after the second hit to inflict poison damage, and then give yourself time to recover energy. That's still only reason 1. Reason 2 is the more obvious one of canceling it in case you miss, which I'm not really sure how you could miss due to the speed of the attack, but whatever. Then you can follow up with a counter in order to trap your opponent, right? To force them to activate something. That way, when the boomerang comes back, it'll hit them anyway. So she has 2 pretty good counters, 2 absolutely insane breakers, and a pretty high damage output due to her poison damage. She's absolutely nuts. There's no real weakness for her either, because sure, she doesn't have any strike attacks, but that can be fixed easily just by slapping any 2 strike assists on her. And even then, you don't really have to, because her own breakers are so fast you can just use those to counter other breakers. The only slight weakness I can think of is that she's a little bit weaker in normal ranked matches as compared to auto-leveled ones due to the way her poison scales, especially at higher power levels, where her poison does almost the same damage in auto level as it does in ranked, so it's not a big deal in ranked to lose 200 HP per second when you have 40 or 50,000 HP, compared to losing 200 HP a second when you only have 20,000 HP. It's because of this that she is even higher than S+, and is in her own god tier category, which I gotta say I really like the design of the like god square right here. I think it looks nice. So, looking at the list, I'm sure you've noticed that there are 2 characters that are missing, those being Ninja Tommy and Dominic, the Rhino Ranger. Obviously, the reason that they're missing is that this list was made before they were added into the game. So, I'm going to go ahead and speculate where I would put them on the list and where they'll probably be. For Ninja Tommy, he's definitely S+ or even God, because he's stupidly powerful. Both of his specials are incredibly fast. Both of them lead into combos, especially his special strike, which is a launcher. So you can do whatever after that move. You can even recover energy and then do something else for some really absurdly long and powerful combos. And then you have his primary attacks, right? So his primary strike, it's a 50-50 that only has a cost of 2 and it's stunned, so it's really, really good. And his counter is actually surprisingly kind of bad. It does really good damage, but it's a passive counter that you need to trigger. And then, once it's triggered, your opponent can still block it. Tommy can cancel it after the first hit, which makes it a 50-50, which is kind of decent. But still, I don't know, it just seems like a weirdly bad attack, considering how good all of his other moves are. And just like another thing overall that he has is that his damage output is really, really high. Due to his overall speed, you can compare him to Adam before Adam was nerfed. But the thing is, his damage is head and shoulders above Adam's. Like, it's way higher than Adam's damage ever was. And I haven't even talked about Tommy's supers, both of which are ridiculous, because his super works differently than basically every other character in the game with a super mode like that. Again, to use Adam as a point of comparison, with Adam, when you activate his super, his special slot and his primary slot both change to one super move. And then once you use them, the super mode ends, and that's it. But with Ninja Tommy, both of his super attacks are in one slot, his special slot, and he can use both of them in a row. It's only after he uses 2 of his super attacks that his super mode ends, which is absurd. It's just There's a reason why no other character works like that. It's because that's just not balanced, like, at all. That's like stupid. So yeah, he's really, really strong. The only reason why maybe he might not be in God is because of his counter. It's not awful, but it is not amazing. And when you compare him to Scorpina, like, all of Scorpina's attacks are outstanding. So for him to have one attack that's just not quite there, I can see the argument for him being S plus. Personally, I would put him at God though, because I don't think his counter really matters that much. So yeah, that's Ninja Tommy. Moving on to Dominic though, I think he's S, just normal S. His attacks are all really, really good, and he's really, like, stupidly overpowered. But the thing with him is that he doesn't have anything that pushes him beyond that. Like, he doesn't have a super mode. He doesn't have any damage that's way too high for what the attack should be. It's really only his special slot that's problematic. They're both really, really fast combo starting moves that he can use and then gain energy after and then go into another thing. So you can get really long combos that cost like 12 points of energy super easily. And they deal like a fairly high amount of damage. So yeah, he's really good as well, but I don't think he's extreme enough to the point that he should be above S. So yeah, that's the list. That's everything that's different between my last video and this one. So again, I'm gonna do a little look to the future. What other character placements could change? I think that Kaya could possibly move down. Maybe she could move down to C. I could maybe see her being moved down. I've been using her a lot, and the big thing that I've noticed is that aside from her tornado attack, her attacks are actually pretty weak and hard to use. So I could definitely see her being moved down, but that's just speculation. Titanium Ranger also could be moved down. I feel like when we put him in B, we assumed that Enway did their jobs when they balanced him, because his primary kick was supposed to get a really big damage boost, but they actually didn't. They actually didn't make it stronger by the amount they said they were going to. So it's actually a lot weaker than it should be. So I think because of that, he might move down. So yeah, that's about it. That's the only things I can say about the future. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.